So here's how it works. You take the blue pill, the story ends, you wake up in your bed, and you believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you listen to Thrive Loud, and Lou shows you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Would you like to learn from those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level? Best-selling author of Speakeasy and master connector Lou Diamond is here to connect you to some of the most inspiring and amazing people on this planet. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another spectacular episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. You know all that, but today your game is going to be upped because I have for you a scientist, entrepreneur, author who specializes in resilience and reinvention. She is the founder and chief reinvention officer at the Reinvention Academy. She has helped hundreds of companies reinvent their products, leadership practices, business models to meet new market demands and prepare for incoming disruptions. She's an incredible speaker. She's delivered 4 TED Talks in 4 countries. She's on a lot of planes all the time. She's written numerous books. And today, she can help us all thrive in chaos. Thrive Loud listeners, I bring you Nadya Zhexembayeva. Nadya, how are you today?
I'm very good and so happy to be here, Lou.
I'm excited. So listeners, I'm going to give a little background here on how I know Nadya, and here she is on the screens for those that are watching on video. Nadya had an opportunity to speak in New York City to a group of other professional speakers and tell her story. It's an impressive one. And what I want to do is give a little bit of a rewind for our listeners here, Nadya, kind of explain how the world you came from, what you grew up in, and how that kind of formed exactly what you do today. And then we'll dive into the work you do today. Does that sound like a good way to let this conversation kick off?
Sounds good.
All right. So rewind for the listeners. Share with everyone where you came from and what it was like growing up as Nadya.
Well, I always think that I had an amazing childhood, but reversing back and reflecting on that childhood, I can see that a lot of my today's work and reinvention stems from my childhood, my parents' childhood, and even my grandparents' childhood. I was born in the Soviet Union in a part called Kazakhstan. It's the 9th largest country in the world with a tiny population. And the reason why our population is tiny is because in about 100 years ago, in late 1920s, early 1930s, the Soviet Union decided to kill 40% of our population to clear up room for the upcoming concentration camps. Almost all Soviet concentration camps, with few exceptions, were housed in Kazakhstan, and also to have land to do testing for the nuclear bomb in the future, and other horrible, horrible things that happen on our territory for the upcoming 70 years. My great-grandfather survived the famine, but he was a vocal critic and he was arrested and executed as an enemy of the state. And my grandfather, who was left orphaned, was forcefully removed and sent to Russia to live in an orphanage house where he spoke no word of Russian and be re-educated. Yeah. He grew up a vocal critic, has been in prison for his speaking out as a journalist, and killed himself in the 70s. So that was the background into which I was born. How do you live in a world of tremendous disruption and true threat to the safety and security of yourself and your loved ones and still thrive in it? And that has been impacting my work ever since.
Nadya, first of all, thank you for sharing. And I want to help our listeners understand something real important, and that is that you survived through all of this. So with that as an upbringing from 2 generations before you into what you had to come, when did you leave where you were living and come to this side of the planet, if you would?
Sure. I left Kazakhstan in 98 by accident. I got a scholarship to study for 1 year in an American college that was fully paid with a stipend, and I'm forever grateful for that opportunity. For me, the collapse of the Soviet Union in 91, however, 7 years prior, was a turning point. I was under impression that after standing in lines for food, which was my childhood, I thankfully have not seen millions of people being murdered in my lifetime, but I've seen millions of people standing in line for hot dogs for years and years. Yeah. This was our childhood growing up. And looking at that reality with severe food shortages, with absolutely no opportunities, with the Iron Curtain where nobody was allowed to leave the country, with complete abuse of any kind of dissent and people being thrown into prisons for criticizing the government and so on, I was honestly expecting that the collapse would be welcomed by the population, but most people found it incredibly more secure to stay in the terrible present rather than move into unknown future. And we had a huge spike in suicide rates in the 90s where people would rather kill themselves than to reinvent. And that was the beginning of my intellectual curiosity around why are we resisting change so much, and how can we help people manage the turbulent transitions that at that point were still relatively rare and that are becoming an absolute norm today. The type of turbulence we experienced in 1780s and 90s, maybe every 10, 20 years, is something we experience every 1 to 2 years right now. Right. So that was the beginning of my search. And 98 is when I went to study in college. 2001 started my doctorate with this question in mind.
Dr. Nadya. I like saying that. I didn't give that in the intro for those who are here, but you can see that on all the artwork that we have here. Okay, so you've got this personal connection to an absolute visible aversion to change. Mm-hmm. And that is a wonderful example. People would rather kill themselves than have to deal with the change of the world. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go into too much of the psyche, but what I want to go into is understanding yourself a little bit, into recognizing that you saw that this was where your curiosity picked up, and in, I guess, the scientist in you or the researcher in you not only wanted to understand why, but I imagine you also maybe wanted to figure out how to implore people to see the advantages of what change could bring, even though it was uncertain. I would love to know, in getting your doctorate and all of the work that you have done, what was the direction when you started not to look at the bad things that have happened when people are stuck in those awful situations like you had to grow up with and many people in the world are faced with? Explain the uncertainty and how you can make people see greener pastures, bluer skies, better opportunities. Look at that as a positive. What did you do to help get your own mind into that space, considering that you might not have seen it in your lifetime based on the history that you had?
Sure. And that was also interesting for me because, you see, if you think about the life of my grandfather, who went to orphanage house at 14 and killed himself in late 40s, he actually have never seen anything positive. But he stayed trying as long as he could, so that 2 or 3 generations later, I could be on bigger stages in the world and my daughter could enjoy college life. She's a freshman in college right now. So it was kind of power of perseverance and vision that transcends your own lifetime, that gives you the capacity to go on and to not just survive, to thrive. This is similar to what the famous existential psychologist Viktor Frankl wrote about it in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, about his survival in the concentration camp. And he also confirmed from the scientific point of view that it's not the ones who have more food that survive, but the ones that have more faith and hope and a vision of the future, something bigger than themselves to be part of, whether it's science, whether it's God, whether it's my family, but something bigger than oneself. So for me, the research started actually with companies because I felt in early 2000s that I was living in a sort of deja vu. And now it was not people killing themselves, but companies. Yeah. At that point, you could see the collapse of Enron, Kodak and Nokia collapse. Then, of course, the economic crisis with some of the untouchables like Lehman Brothers disappearing. So I wanted to understand what separates companies that are able to survive the disruption from companies that are not just surviving, but thriving in it. And we have excellent research now stemming back to a few economic crises that shows that, yes, in each crisis, about 17% of companies do not make it. But cumulatively, about 10% of companies not just come out surviving, they come out in a better position than the beginning of the crisis. So I wanted to know what separates the one group from another and what do those golden 10% do differently. And what I discovered is that they stop treating change as a one-time project and look at change as a normal, healthy, regular process, project versus process. And the simple difference is the following. If you think of change, reinvention, transformation, disruption as a wedding, something that happens maybe once, twice, maybe 3 times in a lifetime, but generally speaking, for most of us, maybe 2 times. Then you, of course, would not have the best skills in putting together a wedding. There are professionals who know where are the best venues, what are the best prices, how do you organize it, how do you keep it well-oiled and running smoothly. But if you think about change like taking a shower, if I don't take a shower on a regular basis, I begin to stink. If I don't wash off my products, my skills, my offers, my career, my brand, my processes on a regular basis, they also begin to stink. Yeah. And if I understand that I need to take a shower on a regular basis, then I will learn to be very good at taking a shower. It will be well-oiled. It will be internal capacity. It will be great processes. It would be best practices. And that's the difference between those who can deal with turbulence and those who cannot.
So this is an interesting thing to think about when it relates to businesses, just for a quick second. First of all, I imagine when people hear your story and then they think about just small changes in their businesses, because sometimes they're stressing about it, there's a little bit of a perspective shock to them. Like, well, this was someone who was starving for food and standing in line, and we're trying to figure out if we should change the way our product moves and whatnot. There is that great, like, okay, I can't believe I'm dealing with this, and I realize that I should think about change a little bit more differently. But understanding, you probably actually have an understanding of what the DNA is of certain companies and people in these organizations. Have you found that within the organization, you have found more change agents, and it is those that you connect with more ably inside the organizations to get the organizations into that 10% so they can not only survive, but thrive?
Let me address all of those issues very quickly. Number one, there is no such thing as small or big change. From the point of view of biology, not even psychology, biology, the same biological process kicks in. Whether you are dealing with something like you got an email you didn't expect, or a boss said that they're moving to another position and you didn't expect that. Or even, I don't know, you gave birth to a baby you really wanted, not a surprise at all. Biologically, the reaction of the body to that change is the same as finding yourself in a concentration camp. The severity and longevity of your reaction may be different, and being able to get out under the constant pressure might be different, but the initial reaction is generally speaking the same. The second, maybe good news or bad news, is that you are born ready to deal with this reaction. Right. The babies, if there is no tragic disease of some sort or birth defect, the babies are wired to reinvent. The baby doesn't lay there and say, I'm not interested in crawling. I'm just not going to walk. Just not interested. You don't need to give baby a bonus to start walking. And you definitely don't need to train them. We are born to reinvent. And I've yet to see a healthy baby who tried walking, fell 200 times, hit anything possible to hit, and then sitting there and say, this walking thing is just not for me. I'm just not going to do it. They don't do that. They try until they walk. Yeah. And this is the type of stamina and perseverance and a skill of adaptation that we're born with. This is your birthright. You don't need anyone to give you permission to become a reinventor. You are born with it. The problem is that we are educated out of it, and we're educated out of it quite early at age, No conspiracy theory. Nobody is trying to get us. Nobody was trying to control us. It comes from about 200+ years of industrial revolution, where for a very short period in human history, the average life cycle of a typical business became rather long. A median life cycle of a typical business in the 20th century was 75 years. That meant that a company could figure out a general approach to business, a business model, and I'll milk that cash cow for 30, 40, 50 years without any significant change, small continuous improvement, but really nothing really changed. That meant I could graduate from college or high school, enter a company, work in that company my entire life, retire from that company, and never see one reinvention in my lifetime. And that's where our education system runs from.
Right.
It's also where most of our management theory is rooted. So anything you use, whether it's in strategy, operations, supply chain management, marketing, sales, HR, all of those new directions in management are only less than 100 years old. This field is very new, and they are all stemming from the assumption of long cycles. So just to let you know, there's nothing wrong with you. You're normal. You've just been educated out of your natural capacity, and it's time to grab it back.
So I'm going to do a little sidebar here and tell a personal story. This goes back to when I was in college, late 80s into the early 90s. Just dated myself there. And in the late 80s, I was working for a professor who was a consultant. And since I know you went to school at one point in upstate New York, the project was up in a company in Rochester known as Kodak.
Yeah.
And there was this new technology, which was actually a little bit of money had been thrown into by Kodak to look into this thing called digital photography. And what I was actually looked into, this is pre-email internet research. This was like stuff that we needed to do. I actually put together some research that actually said that based on chip involvement, more personal computers. This is before we even knew that mobile phones and we would have a camera in our hands. That the move just to digital photography was going to be a worthwhile investment for Kodak to be the leader in it, since they were the leader in imagery. Now, here was what was crazy. In a very white-haired room of board directors, I was on the back of this room with my professor, who was an advisor on the board of directors. And they were looking at that point for only a small pittance. I would say it was $200,000 investment to continue to do more research and build some of the products. And I heard gentlemen in the room say, why would we ever want to go away from our biggest moneymaker ever? And if you looked at what film cost, how much it cost to make and how much they charged for it, let me make it clear. Film was more valuable than oil, gold, or platinum at that time, the percentage of the markup of what it was worth. So to them, there was no way in the world they were ever getting away from film. And I remembered leaving that meeting, driving from Rochester back to Ithaca in the car with the professor, who was fuming. And I made a comment. I go, how can they not see that something will change? And his line to me, which falls in line with this, is they don't know any better. And I think you're right. That's what they grew up with. So thank you for listening to that side story. It's a true story.
And I want you all to hear this, guys.
Yeah.
There is an assumption that technical and technological innovation kills companies. And here's a company that invented digital photography. So they had the innovation in their hands. It's the mindset that was behind, not the technology. Most of the time, the technology is either available inside or easily acquirable from the outside. Yeah. But we keep thinking it's the technological innovation that is our problem. It's the mindset, culture, processes, business model innovation. And of course, more often it's actually reinvention, not innovation. Innovation is just one of 9 types of reinvention. You sometimes need a small change, not a massive radical innovation. But that's such a powerful story. Thank you for sharing.
Well, and I'll say this to you, Nadya. It proves your point, but it also shows something really good. Kodak is not here today. Okay, and they did not survive, and it's unthinkable to think about it, considering at one point they were part of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. I mean, that's how valuable this organization is, and while it doesn't only stem from that, although that was a big one, but not taking a gamble or reinventing or constantly refreshing their process was an unbelievable challenge. And I'll get one last point here on the business side, because I guess this is the work that you do today. Helping companies understand the importance of this reinvention is one aspect of what you do. Are you also helping them try to figure out what the reinvention is?
Oh, sure. So the Reinvention Academy is now a global movement with reinvention professionals all around the world. And because of that, we even created the Global Alliance of Reinvention Professionals, because we are becoming a powerhouse, whether it's internal jobs, such as Chief Reinvention Officer, or external job, such as a consultant, a person who comes in and help with reinvent. But it is a rapidly growing movement. And I'm happy to say that we are not the kind of community that poops on everyone else. It's the other way around. There is incredible work done in the field of strategy, foresight, change management, Scrum Agile, innovation, design thinking, and I can keep going, Lean Six Sigma, and so on and so forth. All of this amazing breakthroughs have to be connected, united, elevated. And that's what we're doing. We're creating a platform where all of these separate fields and disciplines can actually create a cohesive framework and have much more success at helping companies survive today's disruption and volatility, which is an absolute norm. Now, what we do is we showcase the best existing theories, but also where there's a gap in management science, we develop tools, then we test them with our community all over the world in both for-profit and non-profit or public sectors. We improve the tools and then we release it, and it's all open source. So whenever you study with us, it's a license for life. You don't need to ask for permission or pay us for anything because the need is so high. So what happens is that we have tools that help you diagnose what is going on, but also tools that help you figure out what exactly needs to be reinvented. For example, reinvention maps that show you 15 different directions and the combinations of different things, because it's not always product reinvention. Sometimes it's platform reinvention or pricing reinvention or market segment reinvention or process reinvention, supply chain reinvention, so many different things. We'll help you also think about business modeling differently and give you tools in business modeling. And yes, it is both why, knowing the trends and the context, what, but also the how of reinvention becomes very, very important.
I love it. One last question before I ask one personal question to you and how you thrive in the business that you deal with. And that is, of the types of companies or the types of reinvention that you get to play in, the sandboxes you can jump to, you mentioned nonprofit, profit, I'm sure there's technology, there's operations. Is there one that you like doing more, or is it each time there's a new challenge, it's the challenge and helping to figure out what the reinvention is, that's the thing that you're most excited about? I'd love you to share with the listeners.
Before Reinvention Academy, which was a product of one of our clients, for 15 years now, we've run a reinvention agency. And the first 7 years, we had no business card, no website, and we had an ugliest name accidentally created out of the first name of my husband and my last name, his last name and my last name.
That's a big name, by the way. That's a lot of names and letters, I would imagine.
So we just put the first initials into the name when we were incorporating, because we were asked to do it on the spot. And we're like, yeah, Jay-Z Consulting sounds good. Never in our mind did it cross that it sounds maybe like a very famous rapper, and maybe your serious consulting business should not be called Jay-Z. Didn't cross our mind. First 7 years, this was our company, and we were passed from hands of one CEO, one business owner, one board member to another. And we were taking anything that was complex. The challenge that drives me is complexity. Okay. So we would be asked to help a company that is publicly traded on London Stock Exchange, but is doing very poorly and they don't know why. Or we had some tragic events like CEO killed himself. What do we do next? Or we have a product portfolio with more than 180 products in one category. It's completely just disjointed. We don't know, do we kill all those brands and create one brand? Do we rethink the portfolio into what? So it would be very, very different types of problems. 7 years into existence, 2014, we couldn't accept new clients, even though we had a beautiful network of partners, other consultants who were working with us. And one of our clients said, if you cannot come fix us, come teach us. Mm. And that's how we started developing the courses and the certification and the tools and all kind of science around it. So it was all driven off the market. And I truly believe if you are in the consulting, coaching, training, speaking field, working off the needs of market rather than pushing down the throat of your customers, whatever you think they need, is generally speaking a safer bet at this point.
Always the case. Find out what they need and how you could best help them. Totally with you on that. Nadya, I love asking guests this question. I want to see where this goes. To say you've been thriving through your life is an understatement. It's literally been the purpose that has helped you keep moving onward and upward, which is why you're here on Thrive Loud and why when I heard your story, I wanted you on Thrive Loud. Listeners need to know she's so busy. This took months in the making to get her on the program, and we're glad to have her here, which means on most days you're thriving, but we all have those days when we're not. Nadya, when you have trouble thriving, what practice do you seek, or maybe which individual do you seek out to get yourself back on the thriving track?
I actually not thrive every day for a bit. I think it's a healthy flow. I think if we are at the peak every second, it's an incredibly unhealthy situation. If you think about our heartbeat, goes up, goes down, there's something in between, up, down, something in between. That's a healthy heartbeat. Nature, it's fall in Ohio right now. Nature takes a rest for fall and winter and then peaks again in spring and summer. So I go through the cycles every day and I try to build around that every day. So I have a lot of intense practices in the morning, including meditation and physical exercise to deal with the stamina required and get my nervous system in order, including I use hypnosis. I've gave birth with self-hypnosis. So I've been using hypnosis since 2003 when I was still preparing. And it's been an incredibly important part of my life in addition to meditation. Throughout the day, however, I always book time with myself. So between calls and meetings, I just need to step out and recenter and breathe a little bit and just be with myself. And another practice that I do a lot is I need to laugh every day. So if I don't have a good day, I have a backup of videos I save on my phone that guarantee to give me a laugh, and I just need a couple of minutes. The change in your biology, you need to understand that this is not about psychology. This is about the hormonal cocktail.
Yeah.
So it immediately changes the hormonal cocktail in your body. And then off that, you can address any challenge you are facing.
Let's do the admin part of the show, and then we're going to have an extended version of Fun Street. Nadya, share with the listeners all the places people can find you, websites, URLs, posts. We'll put it all in the show notes, but it gets more engagement when they hear it from you.
Absolutely. We have a one-stop shop called learntoreinvent.com. The number 2 is a number in the middle. So reinvent.com, where you can find something for everyone. We have resources such as an 85-page preview of my latest book, The Chief Reinvention Officer Handbook, How to Thrive in Chaos. That's tool-based. So the moment you download it, the first tool you will get is a test, a diagnostic where you can self-test how good you are at managing disruption and change. And then there are other tools in that download. But you can also find the business model reinvention cards and download those. You can find other tools, learntoreinvent.com. And of course, check out my TEDx talks. If you just go to YouTube and patiently type my last name, you will find plenty of free resources.
Listeners, not the people who are viewing, because we'll put this across the screen afterwards. It is Zhexembayeva, and that's Zhexembayeva. I practiced this beforehand. So
Thank you.
All right, Nadya, you ready to go down Fun Street with me?
100%.
Okay, first of all, I had a little bit of time on this. We talked about this in the opening before we went on the air. Share with the listeners one of your favorite movies or streaming shows that you're watching that you're enjoying most, or maybe that you like to go to more often than not.
I have 3 that are running at the moment. So I've been a fan of Friends ever since the 90s. I still go back to Friends when I need a quick hit.
Okay.
In the later years, recently, a very unknown, I think, series called Sense8. Sense8, Sense and the letter 8. That is done by Wachowskis, the same people who produce Matrix.
Gotcha.
On Netflix has been tremendously empowering. And also I fly a lot, so I pick up a lot of amazing movies on the plane. And I just came back from Europe and flying from Frankfurt. Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. Okay. Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. It's a movie about reinvention of the house of Christian Dior. And I just love the movie. Guaranteed feel good. You have a bad day, just watch that movie. It's a post-war movie. It also puts things in perspective on how good or bad we have it. But it is a very pragmatic feel-good movie. Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris.
I like it. All right, we're going to do the speed round here, Nadya. I think you can handle it. You've handled lots of harder things in your life, so this should be no problem. I'm going to ask you something, and I just want the first thing that comes to your mind after each question. And these are things that lift you up, motivate you, make you feel good. They basically make you thrive. Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Recently or of late, a song that you've been listening to or one that pumps you up.
You won't find it because it's in Russian, right? I grew up in a Russian-speaking household, and there is one about heart that really, in your heart, that's the name of the song, Serce, that keeps coming.
Who's the performer that sings it?
New. This will not be helpful to our listeners, but the most important thing, find the music that speaks to you. That speaks to me right now. We're in the middle of a war in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
The entire post-Soviet Union divided into who is Ukraine side, who is Russian side, and a lot of my family friends are in Ukraine literally fighting right now with guns in their hands. So there's a lot of reminiscence and rethinking and reflecting happening. That's why I'm listening to those songs right now.
Favorite food that is not a dessert?
Watermelon. I don't know if that's a dessert, but I'm big on fruits, and watermelon by far
well,
is
the
my
question
favorite
is,
food.
what would be your favorite dessert? If watermelon is that too, or is there another dessert or sweet?
Ice cream, but I'm becoming lactose intolerant, so I get it very, very rarely.
An activity you wish you did more of?
I see my daughter. I haven't seen her for 7 weeks now, and it's been the longest. So, yeah, we're driving tomorrow, but spending more time with my family, just having more people over also. This year, it's been only 2 or 3 group of guests. I want guests every month.
An activity you wish you did less of?
Admin work, every kind. But I am extending our operational team to take over so many more things that I'm becoming a bottleneck for my team. So I just need to push things and release them from suffering when I'm not responding.
If I could snap my fingers and Nadya can be anywhere in the world, where is she?
Right now, Scotland. I have been dreaming of visiting. I've never been. I've only been to the southern part of UK. I would love to see Scotland. I think there's some magic in that land.
You brought this up right at the top of Fun Street here, which is obviously not a fun topic. And I wanted to ask this, and bringing this full circle, this conversation, Nadya, obviously there's more terror and bad things happening and what's going on in Russia and the Ukraine. You have a platform here maybe to speak about it. If there's causes or things that you want to bring to attention to others or things that we can do, we can use this show as a platform to do that. So if you would, maybe share your thoughts or 2 cents, and I'll give you the microphone here.
I think the most important thing is not to look away. And it's not only about Ukraine war and Russia's war on Ukraine, but it's also about what's happening in Yemen continues to go on in Syria. There are parts of Africa that are now under violent situation, and Iran protests with another teenager killed every few days. The daunting thing is to keep that on top of our mind. And I understand, I too don't want to be in that space every day. And there is another basically amazing, just one of my favorite movies called King Arthur and the Legend of the Sword. There are many King Arthur's movies. This one is by Guy Ritchie, and I highly, highly recommend it, specifically by Guy Ritchie. And there's a moment there where the mage who is a coach to future King Arthur, she's a consultant coach, and she is taking him through a challenge. And in that challenge, he's not doing very well. And she asked him after that challenge, she says, "Did you see everything you needed to see, or did you look away?" And she says, "Don't take me wrong, I also look away. But that's the difference between a human being and a king. You don't have a luxury of looking away." And I think we live in a world where looking away is costing us more than keep looking at the incredible challenge that we as humanity facing, whether it's war, climate change, or economic crisis, or just a bad day in a family. Don't look away, look at the reality, and then use that reality to come with something better than what you see.
Nadya Zhexembayeva, truly a pleasure to have you on Thrive Loud. Thank you for that message. Thank you for being here. We'll share this episode everywhere, and truly a pleasure and honor to have you on the program here.
Thank you so much for having me, Lou, and thank you for all the work you're doing for the world.
You got it. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep moving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.